Okay, so let's take a look at some what we'll call closed voiced triads. What does that mean? What does closed voiced mean? Well, essentially, when we stack our major triads, root, third and fifth, you have the option to stack them in order or in any random order. You could have root, third, fifth, but you could also have root, fifth, third. A closed voice triad has consecutive intervals being stacked on top of each other. So root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, so on and so forth. Now it doesn't matter where you start in each one of those patterns. I could start on the root, third, fifth, that would be in order. If I started on the third, three, or third, fifth, root would be closed voiced. Third, fifth, root. If I went third, root, fifth, suddenly it's not a closed voice triad anymore, but you'll start to hear the sound of that when we look at some of these things. So a closed voice triad is where the notes are stacked consecutively, the intervals are consecutive. How can we play those, or what do they sound like for a start? They're very tight voicings. They work lovely if you're working with arranging for a string section, for example, or if you're working on piano voicings and things like that. They sound like this, and this would be a C major closed voice triad. Or if you play chords like a progression. Closed voice triads. They've got a pretty sound, and it's not like when you're playing because when I play chords like that, we don't actually have a closed voice triad here. We've got the root, the fifth, the root, the third, the fifth, and the root. So just right off the bat, the fact that we've got the root and then the fifth, I'd look to you and say, where's the third? Root, third, fifth, not root, fifth, third. That's not a closed voice triad. They have a different sound to them. So how are we going to learn these closed voice triads? Well, we're going to fit them around the cage system, something we've already learned, something we already know. So what I would ask you to do is go to the A shape of the cage system, or shape 4. Shape 4 of the cage system is going to look like this. Remember, just to recap, that's 3 on the A string, 5, 5, 5 on the D, G and B, and then 3 on the high E. Okay, so right off the bat, those first 3 notes at the bottom of the chord, if I talk to you about the intervals that we're playing there, root, third, fifth kind of thing, we're not playing the root, the third and the fifth there. We're playing the root, C, the fifth, G, and then the root, C again. That's not actually a triad right there. Those 3 notes, that's actually a power chord. It doesn't become a triad until I add the E note in. What we want is a closed voice triad. So how are we going to do that? Well, what we'll do is we'll start at the top of the chord and move down through the possible inversions. We'll get to that word though. So the first 3 notes at the top of our chord would be this: 5, 5 and 3 on the top 3 strings. C, E, G, 5, 5, 3. It's a C major chord. There's a different sound than this, right? It's a nice pretty voicing. And when I play these voicings, just as a technical note, what I tend to do with a picking hand is I hybrid pick them, which is pick and 2 fingers at the same time. It's more pianistic in its sound. You don't have the sound of a strumming through the chord, which sounds very much like a guitar. I am playing the guitar, but you know, sometimes I don't want to sound that way, so it sounds a lot more like a piano where you're hitting the notes at the same time. Totally up to you how you play these though. What's really important is the fingering of the chord. So there we have C, E and G, a C major triad. Now what I can do from here is I can move up through what are called inversions. So what's an inversion? Well, if you invert something, you're turning it on its side or upside down or whatever. We're essentially going through the cycle. C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G, round and round and round. If you start on C, C, E, G. But if you start on E, you'd have E, G, C. If you start on G, you'd have G, C, E, and it would continue going on. So a nice way to think of that is if you put the notes C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G around a clock, and then were to take 3 random adjacent notes, you're always going to have a major triad, C, E, and G, but they'll be in a different inversion each time. Sometimes they'll have a C on the bottom, sometimes they'll have an E on the bottom, and sometimes they will have a G on the bottom. That's an inversion, essentially. And technically, I mean, they sound different when you play an inversion. If I play a C major chord with the 5th in the bass, that's an inversion, you would have this. Sounds different to putting the C in the bass. But we're really not going to think of it like that. What we're going to worry about when we're playing these closed voice triads is the actual fingerings of them. We won't think about, is this a first inversion chord, is this a second inversion? Though we will certainly come back to that at a later point when we start talking about how we apply some of these chords. So our first C major open voice triad would be this. If we move each note up to the next note in the progression, C moves up to E, E moves up to G, and G moves up to C. So we've got these 3 notes. That's 9, 8, 8 on the top 3 strings. 9, 8, and 8. Okay, so how can I teach you that in a way that's going to allow you to play it on the fly, instantly? You see the chord C in a chord progression and you play that chord. Because I appreciate that it's no use going C, E, and G. Let's move each one of these up to the next note in the chord. That's a slow process, that will take you time. That's really not how we're thinking about it. These 3 notes are actually just the top 3 notes of this chord. So the secret here is that I'm seeing the big bar form, but I'm playing the top 3 notes. It gives me a dainty voicing, a much nicer, concise, to the point C major sound than playing. You know, you might be playing with a band and you get asked, you know, can you lay back a bit on the verse? Don't play such heavy voicings. And if your chord progression is C, A minor, G, and you're going, it's quite in your face. Having the option to play a C major triad on the top 3 strings, so you go from maybe I play still the same chords, C, A minor, G, but they're a little prettier than so that would be you know, practical application of these, why we're using these. There's our C. Again, just to recap, we've got our C triad played in shape 4 and then a C triad played in shape 1. You can see the big chord. You can play the little chord. And then our final inversion would be this, which comes from that big C major bar shape, shape 3 of the gauge system. Again, I'm just playing the top 3 notes, 12, 13 and 12. Now you've got 3 voicings there that you can practice, and it's easy enough to go between them. The struggle is to be able to visualize the bigger chord real quick. So if you want to practice that, what I would recommend doing is practicing the big chord. C, 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 C. When you can see those, when I can see each one of those, I see that chord, but I go for the top 3 notes. And if I wanted to change that to F, we'd go to G, that would be the applied to each one of those C, F and G chords. In order to do that again, I'm just visualizing the big F chord. Big F, playing the top 3 notes. Visualizing my big F, using the C shape, playing the top 3 notes, visualizing playing those top 3 notes. Very quick way to find these chords, but that's only 3 chords. There are a lot more possible ways to play our C major closed voice triads, and I'm going to run you through those now, but we won't go into too much detail looking at each individual fret and how we're going to finger these. What we will focus on is just playing the exercise. Of course, this is all transcribed in the book for you, so you'll be able to follow along with what I'm doing, but essentially what I've worked out here is a way that you can go between each possible inversion in one position. So I'll walk you through the first one and then we'll play the second ones using the tablature. So the first one will sound like this. Now each one of those 3 note groupings is a triad. But in a different inversion. So what we're going to do is we're going to move across the shape like this, and what you'll find, the interesting thing that happens is you start in one shape of the cage system, the A shape in this particular example, and as you get to the bottom you're forced to move up into the next position. Let's just play it and you'll sort of see what I'm saying. So 5, 5 and 3 on the top 3 strings would be a C major triad, and we could play 5, 5, 5 on the middle strings. D, G and B strings, 5, 5 and 5. So you can see those in that chord, right? From there we can't play this that you might think of in that bar form, because that's not a closed voice triad. It's missing the 3rd. So what I have to do is change position and play this. You might be familiar with that chord from Hendrix's playing. Hendrix played that a lot. Very nice chord where we've got the 3rd in the bass. It's good practice to be able to visualise that, actually, seeing this C major chord here and knowing that I could play as a C major triad. So, to recap, and then on the bottom we've got 8, 7, 5. I actually like to use that as a warm-up exercise for my hybrid picking. When I pick up the guitar in the morning, I'll play through. You see I'm playing pick, finger, finger, pick, middle, ring. Or as chords. Nice way to work through those. So just try that. You might want to pause here and just practice going through those. And really think about where each one of those is coming from. These first 2 fit very much in this C shape, this A shape of a C chord. This bar chord. You'll see that in the tab. And these last 2 fit very much in this G shape. That would be the closed voice triads in that first sort of position on the neck in the key of C. I'm just going to demonstrate them in the last two positions, and then we will play them as a continuous exercise. But essentially the principle is exactly the same. I'm taking my big bar form in C and playing down through the shape, playing every possible permutation of a closed voiced C major triad, C, E and G. Do that in our final position around this C bar chord shape, and again that's our possible 12 fingerings for a closed voice C major triad. Now there's a lot to take in there, but I would recommend you practice it just as I've done there, really focusing on not just where shall I put my fingers, that's useless. You know, learning a random shape, like it's a random shape for you. Unless you know how you can use that or how you can see that on the neck so you can play it in different keys, it's useless information. So practice each one of these and try and relate it back to the C caged shapes that we looked at in the first chapter. I'm just going to play through them now, descending and ascending, moving up in position each time, and then I'll give you one last exercise that will give you a lot of fun / a lot of trouble. So first exercise is going to sound like this. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice little simple way to practice that. Obviously you could arpeggiate as well, as I was doing earlier. However you choose to practice that. All that's important is that you can visualize those triads, and so that you can apply them on the fly. How are you going to do that? Test yourself. Pick a random chord, G sharp major. G sharp would be played here at the 11th fret on the A string, or at the 4th fret on the low E string. So I'm good, for argument's sake, going to say the 11th fret. I'm going to play the C bar shape. Again, for argument's sake, just picking a random one. Now, as long as I can see that shape, I've got all of those triads at my disposal. I could play this, or this, or the top 3 strings, or the bottom 3 strings. Every single one of those is a G sharp major triad. You could pick 4 random major chords and try and play them in one place on the fretboard. That's quite a challenge. If I say A major, C major, D major and E major, and I want to stay at the 5th fret, I would play A major, C major, D major, and then E major. That's all in one place on the fretboard. And the only way I can do that is to visualize A major, C major, in the G shape, D major, sorry, D major to E major, which we played. So we've got A major, G major, sorry, C major, D major, and E major. A, C, D, E. When I can see those big chord forms, I'm able to play any triad from within there. So the last exercise, the last challenge that I'd give you, and there's infinite ways that you can do this, would be to play C major triads going from the bottom of the neck to as high as you can manage. Now you can work these out beforehand if you like, but you know you're really getting this stuff together when you're freely able to move within positions. Let me just play for you so you can see what I mean, and then we'll talk about ways that you can do this. So I might play this. Let's go. Or maybe I go or maybe I go it's a different way each time I've gone up. I've transcribed a couple of examples of how you can do that in the tablature, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm playing a chord voicing, playing one of these little triad voicings. I'm starting with this one, which is the bottom 3 notes of our C major. Triads when played using the C bar chord, playing those 3 notes, and then asking what are my other options? What from here, where can I go? I can either continue vertically up the shape, or I can continue horizontally up the neck. This is where you start asking yourself lots of questions. I've got this chord, what are my other options? What happens if I move up the neck? What would a higher inversion be? Now I'm on this C chord, I've got options. I can either move vertically up the neck, remember from practicing that, or I could move horizontally to the next inversion, which comes from. So practicing that and just sort of forcing yourself to come up with as many possible ways of doing it is really going to sort of open up the fretboard and present you with a lot of options. So maybe you want to pause here and spend a couple of hours working on that as a technique, and then we'll move on to some much more advanced fingerings for these triads, and we'll look at some open voicings which sound very nice, very Eric Johnson. I'll see you on the next lesson.